Good afternoon and welcome to our distinguished panel of witnesses. Thank you for appearing today to discuss the resources and services available to agencies seeking to modernize their outdated and obsolete legacy IT systems. There's a lot to discuss today: how Congress can supplement these resources in order to accelerate modernization, hold agencies accountable to their modernization plans, and reduce the federal government's reliance on aging technology. Also critical here is, of course, ensuring that in all of these efforts, we're staying focused on saving taxpayer dollars. This is critically important because we know that outdated technology fails to serve the American people and is insecure against sophisticated cyber attacks. It also wastes billions in taxpayer dollars every year due to poor procurement actions, improper payments, and expensive contractors needed to operate and maintain aging systems. I also want to thank Ranking Member Paul, who is unable to join us today, and his staff for working with me on this hearing and more broadly on our ongoing efforts to curb wasteful spending. Just last week, we introduced the 2021 edition of Acting on the Annual Duplication Report Act, which would implement recommendations made to Congress by the Government Accountability Office to eliminate wasteful duplication, fragmentation, and overlap across the federal government. I look forward to working with Ranking Member Paul and all of my colleagues to move that bill forward. Today's hearing builds on a hearing this subcommittee held in April that focused on the issues that are holding agencies back from realizing significant cost savings, increased security, and greater service delivery by modernizing their systems. The question we're asking today is, how are these agencies using existing tools and resources to transform their aging technology, and what can Congress do to fill the gaps that may remain? At our previous hearing, former federal agency chief information officers and a Government Accountability Office expert on federal IT management discussed the costs and challenges that legacy IT systems present. We learned that detailed IT modernization plans are critical to an agency's long-term success in updating IT and budget for capital projects. We learned that funding mechanisms, such as the Technology Modernization Fund and agency working capital funds, need to be improved to accommodate multi-year modernization efforts. And most importantly, we learned about the impact that the federal government's aging IT infrastructure has on the American people. Despite some challenges, agencies have a tremendous opportunity to modernize these outdated systems and, in turn, make government more effective and efficient. Over the course of the pandemic, we saw chief information officers across the government quickly equip their agencies to work remotely. Congress and the executive branch have made more financial resources available to agencies to upgrade their IT systems than ever before. And there are programs and policies in place to assist agencies in taking their aspirations and turning them into achievements. Lending their expertise and insights on what more we can do to address the challenges we face is our panel of very accomplished witnesses, consisting of the Federal Chief Information Officer, the Administrator of the U.S. Digital Service, and the Director of Technology Transformation Services. I look forward to hearing from all of you today about your work to assist agencies in reducing their reliance on costly, outdated, and obsolete technology. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you to all three of you for such clear and good testimony. And I'm going to begin with my round of questions. And as I indicated earlier, this is a complicated afternoon in the Senate, so people are going to be coming and going from votes and maybe joining us remotely. But the level of attendance is yet to be determined, is what I'm trying to say. So let me start with a question to Ms. Shung and Ms. Martorana. The U.S. Digital Service is known for quickly responding to crises when they arise. For example, in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. Digital Service assisted agencies with increasing their digital capacity to serve the American people. But even in the absence of a crisis, the U.S. Digital Service is also capable of taking a proactive approach to IT modernization and digital transformation that can yield really impressive results. For example, the U.S. Digital Service was able to collaborate with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid on its payment processing system. The system was more than 50 years old and relied on outdated code, which made it difficult to use, costly to maintain, and vulnerable to improper payments. But with the help of the U.S. Digital Service, CMS modernized its system and migrated it to the cloud before it encountered a major system failure or similar crisis. So, Ms. Shang, how can the U.S. Digital Service jumpstart agency IT modernization and movement away from legacy IT as it did with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid?
Senator Hassan, thank you so much for that question. It's a great one. It boils down to leadership. So a crisis creates a situation where doing something differently from how you've done things in the past suddenly becomes absolutely necessary, and everyone can agree on that. It creates an opportunity for, as Claire noted, show, don't tell, the opportunity to do things differently and to see how that evolves. That said, the same circumstances can be created without a crisis through responsible leadership and the executive within an agency. So if executives truly understand the implications of their IT systems to their core operations, if the executives are deeply committed and leaders are deeply committed to ensuring that technology systems and technical systems continue to support the mission, they too can create the circumstances where it doesn't feel risky to do something different, but instead feels like the appropriate thing to do.
Thank you. Ms. Maturana, on the topic of improper payments, how are other agencies that manage federal benefits taking advantage of IT modernization, such as cloud computing, to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer dollars?
Thank you for that question. There are significant efforts underway across multiple agencies that are delivering benefits to and services to the public that are focused on assuring that the benefits make their way to the recipients. There are activities that are going on in partnership with federal agencies and reaching out to states where those payments are ultimately delivered in some cases. So IT modernization, we're doing several different things across the federal enterprise to focus on this. One is a concerted effort to do user research, making sure that we understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and understanding both the technical and cultural challenges and business process challenges that are often the complex mix that causes challenges in operations. So we are learning across the federal enterprise, and one of the unique groups that I have the great fortune to work with is the CIO Council. And through that vehicle, we share these best practices and lessons learned. Recently, a CIO came in the open of a meeting, talked about the fragility of a system and was seeking the advice of other CIOs to remediate the issue. So I think we will continue to see both on the digital side, the collaboration that we all benefit from, but also in the planning and execution of these large policy efforts that are impacting service delivery to the public.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Svinich. While GSA's technology transformation services provide a number of innovative tech products and services to agencies, I want to specifically discuss the 10X and Presidential Innovation Fellows programs. Both of these programs are designed to bring in new ideas to enhance government IT performance and promote better service delivery. Can you explain how the 10X and Presidential Innovation Fellows programs work, and what specific innovations have come out of these programs that are making government IT work better for the American people?
Thank you for the question. I'll start with 10X. 10X is a program that is modeled off of best practices around private investment, so venture investment, and it uses a phased approach to invest in ideas that might scale in government technology. So one of the lessons that we have learned is that not every idea is of equal merit. And frankly, the most expensive ideas in governments are the ones that think that they're great ideas, but actually don't really bear out. And so the benefit of 10X is that we've evaluated over 1,000 ideas, been able to graduate the ones that have the most merit into production. So programs like the US Web Design System that I mentioned in my testimony serves almost 250 million sessions per month. That was originally a proposal that came through the 10X process, and it allows for almost, I think, 80-something agency partners to use that consistent experience across the federal government. That's the sort of thing that comes out of 10X. And we're very proud of the work that we do, largely because it does use the best practices, that phased investment approach that you see in private industry, and take that into government. In that same vein, the Presidential Innovations Fellows Program pairs private sector entrepreneurs and innovators with public sector leaders. So the thesis behind the PIF program, as we call it, is to pair PIFs with deputy secretaries, CIOs, CXOs across the government, and make sure that they're bringing that innovation into the government. The interesting plot twist is that these PIFs often end up staying in government, and it's been a really extraordinary opportunity to bring that innovation into the public sector, get them attached to the mission that we all know is important, and have them stay and really contribute that service to the American people.
Great. One of the projects funded by 10X focused on assisting agencies with IT management, budgeting, and planning by producing a field guide to what's known as agile acquisition, a term of art that I wanted to make sure I understood. Agile acquisition allows agencies to test new products and work with program developers to incorporate user feedback into product design to ensure that the products work and meets the agency's needs before the agency makes that kind of major investment. I think that's really what you were just getting at. So talk a little bit more about how agile acquisition saves taxpayer dollars and how we can ensure that agencies pursue agile acquisition processes as much as possible.
It's such a great question. So I think one of the things that we often see in procurement is that two things are true. One is that there's the tendency to think about procurement sort of in silos. In software, we talked about how software is a team sport. You want to make sure that everybody's on the same team and focus and service delivery on behalf of the user. The same needs to be true in procurement. You can't have a contracting officer sitting on the other side of the CIO, sitting on the other side of the finance, sitting on the other side of legal. Everyone needs to be on the same team, focused on procurement outcomes. And agile acquisition is really trying to bring teams together so that we're focusing on how do we actually do iterative development? How do we actually make sure that we're focused on outcomes, not just outputs, outcomes on behalf of the program. So programs like 10X create opportunities to both show how it works and then also to teach so that we have ability to do once and reuse. And so we're really proud of the work that come out of the guides, de-risking guidance and the like, and thank you for that question.
Well, it's really important work, and again, it gets at this whole of government approach, sharing information, breaking down silos. A question for you, Ms. Martorana. The many policies, programs, services, and financial resources available to agencies seeking to modernize their IT systems can only be useful if the agencies are taking advantage of them. Is there currently a way to track agency use of the various tools, services, and resources that we've been discussing today and measure whether they are helping agencies effectively modernize?
Thank you for that question. There are numerous planning tools that are in place related to IT tracking, cost, scheduling, performance, and IT system modernization projects in total. The IT dashboard, the SIPC process, through FISMA. There are many, many mechanisms that we are using. One of the things that is a focus of my office is with so many data inputs, we want to make sure that we are making the best informed decisions with the data, right? Just gathering data for compliance reasons alone and not being able to tie the data to a very specific outcome, making sure that we are having the greatest impact with the investment dollars that we are given, and they are taxpayer dollars. We all take that very seriously. We want to make sure through those tools that we are looking at fraud, waste, and abuse as kind of the cornerstones of good business. That's what any good business person does. But I do think that there are opportunities for us to get better at this. I think that transparency and accountability for some of these projects, we have over 700 high-value assets in the federal government. That's a large data set. I think in total we have over 8,000 large IT projects that are active in the federal government. So we're trying to think of ways where we can use data and data visualization to drive some informed decision-making and also help us identify risk earlier in the process.
Okay. Are there any other things you think you need to implement? Essentially, you talked a little bit really about data collection and possibly tracking how agencies are using, but to really implement kind of the assessment function, do you feel like you have the tools and it's just a matter of directing them correctly, or there are other things you could develop or use?
I think the complexity of this is really challenged by some of our funding mechanisms.
Okay.
Single-year funding for projects that are complex adds quite a bit of burden to the process and sometimes forces people to make decisions in advance of having a fully validated plan.
Got it.
I think we also have opportunities and need for business process improvement, making sure that to our team sport theme today, that both program officials, agency officials, CIO teams, our procurement colleagues are all focused on accomplishing the same end result. And I think, again, I would kind of go back to funding, making sure that we have flexible funding vehicles like TMF, which is allowing us to move out on multi-year modernization projects, but surrounded by a team of people that are incented by our collaborative nature to hopefully drive a better improvement of the service delivery that we're trying to accomplish. So I think those things in combination are keys, and I think it requires partnership also with the Hill for us to be successful.
Okay, thank you. I think we are expecting another senator shortly, but I'm going to continue along with my questions until she gets here. And this is a question to all three of you. As part of the American Rescue Plan, the Technology Modernization Fund, administered by the Office of Management and Budget and the General Services Administration, received $1 billion to increase the fund's capacity to assist agencies in achieving their IT modernization goals. And we just touched on this a little bit, but in addition to the American Rescue Plan, the American Rescue Plan also provided funds to the IT modernization services and programs at the U.S. Digital Service and GSA. So to date, what projects have these funds supported? What benefits are the American people receiving or will receive as a result of these projects? And why don't we start with you, Ms. Shung, and then we'll go to Mr. Zvinich and then to Ms. Maturana.
Thanks for the great question. So I would love for Claire to speak to the details of the TMF money since she is responsible there. But I would add that the ARP funding to ITOR or to USDS-specific programming has enabled a number of programs to be staffed and for us to work towards program outcomes. So in particular, this has enabled our work on vaccines.gov and the assistance hotline and text line associated with that. It has allowed us to do work towards the child tax credit in collaboration with Treasury and IRS. It has enabled work on unemployment insurance and modernizing those systems and programs. It has enabled our work on the emergency broadband benefit program at the FCC, work in the social safety net benefits programs that are administered by USDA and FNS, emergency rental assistance at Treasury, and then us to support programs at SBA around shuttered venue operators grants and restaurant revitalization fund. So I would note that in addition to helping us directly support those specific programs and ensuring that service delivery against those programs achieves the intended goals of the program, it also allows us to work in all of those agencies on a mission critical program that is of high priority, which allows us to show that agency and work closely with that agency on implementing new, more modern capabilities to help that agency have an example of what more modern capabilities look like. As Claire noted before, and I also mentioned, a lot of times what it takes to sort of, to your first question, like what motivates change, the mandate to do something new in addition to visibility into how to do it differently often creates an opportunity for more widespread change within an organization. And so in addition to the direct benefits to these programs, it also has allowed us to work closely with and help modernize some of the practices at each of those agencies.
Thank you. Mr. Svinich.
Thank you. I too will defer to Claire on the TMF, but for our purposes, the American Rescue Plan has enabled a number of different investments. We also have supported a number of specific agency initiatives under the American Rescue Plan. But because of TTS's unique role to focus on cross-agency initiatives and to think about how we might be able to provide sort of the reusable aspects, a number of our investments have been sort of building on the theme of 10X. So we talked about the idea of those investments in trying to find what in the venture world you would say multiples. And so things like the U.S. Digital Core is an investment that we made. And the U.S. Digital Core is an investment in trying to bring in the next generation of technology leaders and trying to find early career technologists in government. That's the sort of thing that we think can have not just immediate effect, but transformational effect on government. Also, investments in the FedRAMP automation, and FedRAMP is one of the things that we think enabled us to respond to the pandemic, frankly, is the ability to use virtual technologies and cloud service technologies. And so investments in automation in FedRAMP and sort of improving the throughput in FedRAMP is important. We've also made investments in more speculative things. There's a project that I like called Pi Spots. And the idea with Pi Spots is to say, how might we use Raspberry Pis, which are these like tiny little devices, to maybe bridge the digital divide. So there are a number of investments that we're looking at that some of which might work, some of which might not. But the idea with some of these investments is that we want them to have, again, these return on investment, really focusing on value and using these funds in a way that has both transparency and accountability, but also has real multiples and value to the public.
Thank you. And Ms. Martirana.
Yeah, I really appreciate the congressional commitment to IT modernization through the resources made available through the American Rescue Plan. The funding provided to USDS, GSA, and through the TMF are an investment in both our information security and the quality of government services. Right. So far, we have received applications for TMF funding from 48 different agencies or components of agencies, totaling about $2.3 billion. We have just sent up to Congress for review the first 7 proposals that are going to be awarded through TMF. And they represent about 2/3 of them represent cybersecurity. So the appropriation was for solar winds, mitigating the impact of solar winds and the cybersecurity challenges that we are facing, as well as challenges that came to light during COVID-19. And so what you'll see in the multitude of those project proposals is a new way of us looking at how to disperse money. We really are trying to be strategic investors, working with our agency partners, making sure that we're evaluating these programs, obviously, for the greatest risk that they potentially have to the federal enterprise, but also we're looking at the highest probability of success, the highest value to the public for some of these, and the highest impact to security outcomes. And the focus that we have been able to use a tool that was in the original appropriation but was not utilized previously, but we felt the emergency need of SolarWinds and the COVID-19 pandemic really warranted us focusing on payment flexibility. So we issued guidance on payment flexibility and have had a significant number of proposals come in requesting that due to the urgent need of those agencies asking for that. The investment portfolio guidance that we gave out focused on high-value assets,
Right.
again, really in the swim lane of IT modernization, public-facing digital services, shared services, and cybersecurity. And as I said, about 75% of the project proposals that have come in have had a primary or secondary cybersecurity focus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I'm now going to turn to my colleague, Senator Rosen, for her round of questions.